Hello, my name's Stephen, and this is Faith Ministries. The Bible we're looking at today is about 120 years old since it was published. It's called the Rotherham Emphasized Bible. Now, Joseph Bryant Rotherham, he was born in 1828 and died in 1910. He was an Englishman, son of a Methodist preacher, and he began to follow in his father's footsteps and became preaching in various Methodist congregations around England. But soon after that, he left the Methodists and he joined the Baptists. And then after a while after that, he actually departed from the Baptists, and he became part of the group in England called the Restoration Movement, which was led by Alexander Campbell in the 1850s. He became an evangelist within their church denomination, part of the Churches of Christ in 1854. In his preface to the Bible, he states that his purpose was to aid a certain class of Bible readers who were anxious above all things to get as near as possible to the simple apostolic point of view from which to study the Christian scriptures. During the 1860s, Rotherham began working on the translation of the Bible, called the Emphasized Bible. Before we go any further, let's compare a few verses just to give you an idea of what it's like. Turning to Galatians 2, verse 20, we read in the Rotherham's Emphasized Bible, "With Christ I have been crucified, and living no longer am I, but living in me is Christ. While so far as I now do live in flesh, by faith I live, the faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself up in my behalf." Now, the King James Version says, "I am crucified with Christ. Nevertheless I live, yet not I, but Christ liveth in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me." The American Standard Bible says, "I have been crucified with Christ, and it is no longer I who live, but Christ lives in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself up for me." And finally, the New International Version, "I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I now live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me." So there's quite a bit of difference from the very literal writing or translation of the Hebrew or Greek, or the Greek in this particular case, from the Emphasized Bible right up to the more modern New International Version. Let's have a look then at Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 to 3. In the Emphasized Bible, we read, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth had become waste and wild, and darkness was on the face of the roaring deep. But the Spirit of God was brooding on the face of the waters. And God said, 'Light be,' and light was." The King James Version, as you know, it says, "In the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void. Darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, 'Let there be light,' and there was light." The New American Standard Bible says, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was formless and void, and the darkness was over the surface of the deep. And the Spirit of God was moving over the surface of the waters. And God said, 'Let there be light,' and there was light." The New International Version says, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty, and darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God said, 'Let there be light,' and there was light." The ministry called the Teleios Ministries, they've written about the Emphasized Bible and state that the Emphasized Bible, they said, is one of the most innovative, thoroughly researched translations ever done by a single individual. Its presentation of emphasis and grammatical features of the original language still reward careful study after 120 years. It is the world's best translation of Hebrew and Greek text, they said, that we have seen to date, and the most poetic. Robert Young, from those you know Young's literal translation, he lived around a similar time to Rotherham, he said, This is a strictly literal rendering. May not be so pleasant to the ear as one where the apparent tense is chiefly aimed at, yet it is not euphony, but truth that ought to be sought. There are tens of thousands of departures from the original text in current versions, he said. For example, there are about 2,000 instances in the New Testament where the definite article, the, is omitted, whereas in Rotherham's emphasized Bible, he puts those instances back into it. He puts those these back into the actual text. One way of emphasizing words, in sentences today, as you know, if you're typing something, you want to emphasize it, you either make it bold, you either underline it, or you make it in italics, something like that. And as you can tell from the name of this Bible, the emphasized Bible, it is done as a way to emphasize what is actually happening in the scriptures themselves. A grammatical construction called inversion is a technique that is used throughout the Bible, I believe. The Rotherham's Bible maintains that these inversions and draws attention to them by using the less than and the greater than symbols. And most popular Bibles today, I believe, the New International Version, New Living Translation, etc., they remove thousands of these emphases that were originally put into the Hebrew and into the Greek, which were displayed through grammatical inversion. And what modern translations, I believe, have done is that they've uninverted these sentences in the actual scriptures. So, for example, the very first sentence in Genesis 1:1 is inverted. And it says that God could have written that God created the heavens and the earth in the beginning, or that God in the beginning created the heavens and the earth. But rather, he inverted the sentences to read, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And as you know, a lot of translations put it that way. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And if you look at Rotherham's Bible, he has those less than and greater than symbols either side of the inversion, just to show you that this is something that's been inverted. This is something that's being emphasized, that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And one of the last grammatical inversions is in Revelations 22:19, where it is written, God will take away one's part from the tree of life and out of the holy city, and from the things written in this scroll, if anyone shall take them away from the words of this prophetic scroll. But rather the sentence is actually inverted to read, and if anyone shall take away from the words of this prophetic scroll, God will take away his part from the tree of life and out of the holy city and from the things written in this scroll. So let me just show you what it looks like in the original. So here we have an example of the original emphasized Bible, and this is the actual beginning page in the Bible itself. And it says here that the emphasized Bible, a new translation, it was designed to set forth the exact meaning, the proper terminology, and the graphic style of the sacred originals. It is arranged to show at a glance the narrative speech, the parallelism, and the logical analysis, also to enable the student readily to distinguish the several divine names of God, and emphasized throughout after the idioms of the Hebrew and Greek tongues, with expository introductions, select references, and appendices of notes by Joseph Bryant Rotherham in 1902. There are 40 pages of explanatory notes after that first initial page, until we get to the book of Genesis. Chapter 1, it says, and you notice these brackets that he has for emphasis. In the beginning, it's an inversion. The sentence has been inverted. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And now the earth had become waste and wild, and darkness was on the face of the roaring deep. But the Spirit of God was brooding on the face of the waters, and God said, light be, and light was. And notice he puts in throughout the whole Bible, if you get one of the original ones, these less than and greater than things to talk about the sentence inversion. But also he uses these single and double vertical lines to also emphasize the words themselves. You can't underline them, but he's saying now the earth had become waste and wild, and darkness was on the face of the roaring deep, but the Spirit of God was brooding on the face of the waters, etc. In his way of emphasizing all the way through it. And here in Genesis, it's interesting, he has quite a bit of explanation as to why he actually translated these particular verses the way he has, a lot more than what he does in particular other chapters and verses of the Bible. And it's well worth yourself having a read about them. If we turn to a more modern, written, published book by Rotherham's Emphasized Bible, we see that they've removed all those particular plus than, less than, and greater than, and vertical lines, etc. for emphasis. And so we have here, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth had become waste and wild. The same words, but without all the explanations and all the symbols, etc. that he put in there, and without all the actual appendices and notes that he actually added to it. So the original is much deeper, much worth more reading than this, but it is a great thing to actually have and to be able to look at. If you can look here on this particular page, you can see that the standard word of translation is words like mystery, which comes from the Greek or the Hebrew word mysterion, and Rotherham's translated as being a sacred secret found in these particular verses. Now, I won't go through them all, but you see things like the world, which is used in most translations today, from the Greek word eon, which means an age, eternal, age abiding. Church, he puts down as assembly. And then we come down here, where the King James and some other ones, they tend to use a lot of hell for the only explanation for what hell is. Whereas in the original, it is Hades, he puts down Hades. English, hell, Gehenna, so he puts in Gehenna. Hell, Sheol, he puts in Hades. Lord, with a L, L-O-R-D, Yahweh, he puts in the actual Yahweh. For those of you who like putting God's name in the Bible, he actually puts God's name, Yahweh, in the Bible where it is supposed to put. Also, Lord, Yah, Lord, Adonai, he puts in Lord. God, Elohim, he puts in a G-O-D with a lower O-D. God with L, as in El Shaddai, Elohim, etc. He puts them in a capital G, a capital O, and a capital D. And then God for Eloah, he puts in God, but in Old English script. Other examples of the translations that he's actually done is, for example, in John 19:18, he says, where him they crucified, and with him other two on this side and on that, and in the midst Jesus. And we saw in Genesis 1:2 how he translated, now the earth had become waste and wild and darkness. That infers that it had been, once it had been good, but then had become waste and wild and darkness. Psalm 116 verse 15, costly in the eyes of Yahweh is death, for he is men of loving kindness. 1 Samuel 9:15, now Yahweh had unveiled the ear of Samuel one day before Saul came and saying, unveiled the ear of Samuel. That's a beautiful way of saying it, that he opened his ear to be able to hear what was actually going on. One of the other things that Rotherham did with his emphasized Bible, was to look at the Hebrew and the Greek, and to actually look at the masculine, the feminine, and the neuter as far as the gender of the different words are concerned. In English, we tend to think of male, female as man and woman, whereas if you study other languages like Italian or French, etc., you know that there are different words for house and doors and things. Some of them can be masculine, some of them can be neuter, some of them can be feminine. And it's the same with Hebrew and with Greek. And a lot of the time, I believe, the modern translations have actually nullified or made them more neutral in getting rid of the masculine and feminine side of particular things. But what Rotherham does is that he looks at them and he actually puts them back into the scriptures as they originally were. One of the other things that Rotherham does is, for example, here in Exodus 1:7, we read that he lays it out like this, but the sons of Israel were fruitful, they swarmed and multiplied and waxed mighty with exceeding vigor, so the land was filled with them. He was trying to get that emphasis, that poetic poetic figure of speech within the actual scriptures themselves as to how they were particularly laid out. And it gives them a totally different feel to, like the New Living Translation says, but the descendants, the Israelites, had many children and grandchildren. In fact, they multiplied so greatly they became extremely powerful and filled the land. That is not really as strong as, but the sons of Israel were fruitful, and they swarmed and multiplied and waxed mighty and with exceeding vigor. So the land was filled with them. It has a lot more oomph, more emphasis about it than just the way we normally read it. So if you're actually interested in buying a copy of the Rotherham's Emphasized Bible, you can go to your local Christian bookshop like Hurong, but also you can get it, I believe, here on Amazon.com.au, where you can see they've got the actual Emphasized Bible. And at the moment, they've got it on for $78.14, and which is, it's a reasonable price for a large Bible such as this. And talking of large Bibles, if we drop down to the product details, you can see that it is 1,208 pages long. So that's a quick synopsis of the Rotherham's Emphasized Bible. It has some very interesting things in it, and things which I didn't really touch upon. If you go back and actually get the original Bible, like I had there a moment ago, and read through those 40 pages, it gives detail after detail after detail as to why he wrote the different things that he did and what the different Hebrew and the Greek words actually mean, etc., etc. Rotherham's Emphasized Bible may not be everybody's cup of tea, but I believe that it would be a valuable addition to anybody's bookshelf, their library in their own home or their church, etc. It's an invaluable resource, I believe, to give us a greater depth of the Hebrew and of the Greek by this very gifted man of God. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like, subscribe, and share so more people can see it. And until next time, God bless.